Welcome everyone. So today I'm going to show you how we are going to configure the main server. So this is our main server currently, and we're going to configure this as the primary domain controller. So a few things that you have to be mindful of is your hardware requirements. So uh, for this server scenario, I'm using a i5 processor with 2 GB of RAM memory and 96 GB of your hard drive. Now, the computer name given is main server. So let's begin. First step would be to click on manage, add roles and features. So this will remain as role based. Now at the moment my server has the following IP address assigned: 10.02.15. And the very first thing that I want to do now is install Active Directory users and computers. So that is part of my Active Directory domain services. Now once I've selected my IDDS, you'll notice it is automatically selecting the features that it requires for it to support IDDS. So I'll just simply click on add features. Now remember, I am not selecting DNS at the moment, so there's no changes in this section. The group policy management is automatically selected by default for us. That will allow us to implement group policies in the future. Let's click on next. No changes here. Next, and we'll place a tick here. Restart, yes. So restart the destination server automatically if required, and install. So now the process has started for the first step, which is the installation process of your Active Directory domain services. Now during the process, it may also require additional features which it will ask us to configure. So let's see how that goes out. So as you can now see that configuration is required. Installation has been succeeded on the main server. Now what we need to do is we need to now promote this server to our domain controller. So let's click on that step. Now because we are creating a very new server, we'll click on the third option, add a new forest. Now the first option is usually used when we already have a primary domain controller and we want to add a secondary domain controller. The second option is use add a new domain to an existing forest. So we already have the main server, maybe we want to have member servers that will help us do DFS replication later on. So for this example, I'll use add a new forest, root domain name. Let's say I will use bond. Right, so the bond.local fully qualified domain name has been accepted, and now it is linking the domain name that I have specified with a domain controller called a DNS. Right, so that is okay. Now the password for your directory services restore mode, this is a different password from your admin, and it is usually required in terms of any backup and restoration process of this server. Right, a delegation will automatically be created once I click on the next option. So now the NetBIOS name is going to be established. So it is currently looking for bond.local, whether that is available, and yes, it is available. So therefore .local has now been removed and the NetBIOS name will now be bond. So we can actually use the NetBIOS name when we want to add a client to the domain. Right, no changes in here. So these are the specific folders that this server currently holds. For example, there is a folder called database folder, which is NTDS, and the log files are also stored in the NTDS. So if I were to back up the entire virtual machine to a new server, a new hardware, That means I would need to look for the following directory structure, NTDS file, and the system volume files for me to migrate to another computer. Okay, so no changes in here. This is just a confirmation that these are the following that we have managed. So our domain name is bond.local, the NetBIOS name is bond, and the forest functional level we have left it as Windows Server 2012, and this will now be our DNS server. So that is all good. Let's click on next. So now it will go through a prerequisite check and confirm whether our settings that we have applied on this server are applicable to move ahead. So as you can see, all prerequisite checks passed successfully, and this guarantees that now we can successfully move on to the next step. We do have some minor example. In this case, we do have some minor warnings, right? So we can accept the warnings or we can proceed by ignoring the warning. Let's click on install. So the DNS is now being installed together with the group policy object. And these are some steps that are required for us to configure a primary domain controller. We also need to have a static IP that I have already assigned. Okay, so the installation was successful. Let's wait for it to complete and it will restart an update. As you can now see, we have successfully configured our domain controller. So Bond is now automatically logged in. Let's enter the authentication. So if I click on the local servers, you will now notice that this is the main server and the domain is bond.local. So this is our main primary domain controller with the roles. So example, if I go to tools, Active Directory used in computers, this confirms that I have successfully configured my primary domain controller as bond.local. In the next video, I will show you how we configure a client to be added to the domain controller.